Yeah, hello. Well, warm welcome to everyone. It's great to have you with us again in the second evening of our series on racial trauma and growth. So the event is organised by the London ACEs Hub Racial Justice Workgroup in partnership with Trauma Informed Schools UK. And for those of you who were unable to be with us yesterday, it's great having you here this evening. So I'm Roger. I'm one of the directors of the London ACEs Hub, and we have a commitment to challenge discrimination in all its forms. And so it's very important for us that this cause is taken forward. So I'm going to hand over just to Derek to introduce himself.
Thank you, Roger. Well, I'm Derek Williams, and I'm a co-lead today. So like yesterday, we had a great evening, and I'm the co-lead of the London ACEs Hub Racial Justice Working Group. I'm also a community leader, and I do so much other things in the community, but today I'm going to be inspiring and motivating you and telling you to all get involved, because it's definitely going to be a buzz. So stay tuned to this. It's going to be brilliant.
Thanks, Derek. Thanks, Roger. Yes, hello, everybody. It's wonderful to be here with you today. My name is Tiane Graziottin. I am one of the directors of the London ACEs Hub. As we said, for those of you who were with us yesterday, but for you, if you are just arriving today, welcome as well. The London ACEs Hub is committed to promote awareness of adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs, trauma-informed care and resilience throughout our diverse communities of London. But as we know, we do have people from all over London today and beyond, and even our lovely colleagues from Wales and other parts of the UK as well. So welcome, everybody. We are super happy to have all of you with us this evening. Back to you, Roger.
Hello, thanks again. So the topic of today's session is power and systemic racism, the ocean we are swimming in. So the evening will be divided into three sections. We'll start by playing the film for 25 minutes from the point where we stopped yesterday. Then our guest speakers will share their reflections for about 8 minutes each. And after this, we'll open the conversation to all of you. And we encourage you to use the chat now to share where you're joining us from and what's your role or your activity. We've got many participants, as was said, really good to acknowledge our colleagues from Wales, other parts of the UK. So a really warm welcome to everyone. The film we're presenting was produced by Trauma Informed Schools UK as an educational documentary. And in today's session, we'll start exploring in more detail the actions that must be taken to promote genuine understanding, change, and growth.
Well, I tell you, this film is very deep. It's going to be very good, and it's going to stir up a lot of emotion in a lot of people. So we don't aim to hurt or make anyone feel uncomfortable, but sometimes you've got to go through these things to understand what's happening. So we bear in mind that if you do feel uncomfortable, please just take time to step back, breathe for a while, and then rejoin. But try to share this experience with everyone else, because it's very special that we get the word across to everyone.
Thanks, Derek. Very good words indeed. So what we're hoping then is that this evening will give you a chance once again to be informed, to look at opportunities to consider the depth of the problems. But we also hope it will inspire us all to think about ways of increasing hope, resilience, coming together as communities, promoting recovery, and pushing for serious changes. Just like yesterday, the speakers' contributions and the following discussion will be recorded and made available on the London ACEs Hub online platforms for the benefit of people who cannot be here today. So we ask you to bear this in mind if you want to put questions or share your experience or make comments. The chat and Q&A boxes are available throughout the evening, so please do use them, as we love receiving your hellos. For questions, please use the Q&A box only, so it'll be easier for us to spot and share them with the speakers. You'll also have an opportunity to ask questions live during the Q&A session if you use that kind of raise your hand box there. We'd also just like at this point, as we have on other occasions, just to acknowledge the seriousness of this topic. We are going to invite you to take a minute's silence to reflect on why we're here today, and just to open our hearts and our minds to the next 25 minutes in the film and the following discussions.
Okay, I'll start by introducing Professor William Les Henry. Professor Les was born in Lewisham. He's of Jamaican parentage and is a professor of criminology and sociology at the University of West London, and is the course leader of the MA Global Black Studies, Decolonisation and Social Justice. He is a British reggae DJ, Leslie Lyrics, and is a writer, poet, and community activist who is renowned as a first-rate public speaker. He has featured in numerous documentaries and current affairs television and radio programs, and lectured nationally and internationally on behalf of private and public institutes, including but not restricted to the University of Oxford, Cambridge, the University of the West Indies in Jamaica, SOAS in London, Howard University in the USA, and Yale University in the USA. Prof. Les, please could you turn your camera on, unmute yourself, and share your thoughts with us?
You know, some of what I saw in the film I thought was quite interesting. I think there are a few things that you know, as we go on, we can expand and develop. So, for instance, from time I've been saying that knowledge gives us the power to liberate or enslave. Knowledge has been racialized, and that's why we're having this conversation. So it's not knowledge per se, it's what you do with it. And I found it kind of interesting as well when there was the suggestion about history being kings and queens and heroes. Well, that is exactly what is wrong with history if we de-racialize it anyway. We don't get the history of ordinary people, and that makes sense because of the people who actually write and commit to researching or writing or in a privileged position to speak about what history represents. So I think there are some broader discussions that we can have as we go on. But yeah, my thoughts on what I witnessed, I thought some of it was, I mean, the spaces it opens for discussion are important. Like, you know, what is decolonization and why is it crucial for us to, you know, partake in that? But as I said, yeah, I think I will leave what I've got to say there because I'm more interested in us kind of reasoning with everybody through this.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much. I now have the pleasure to introduce Cassandra Vitalis. Cassandra is a proud mother of two, born and raised in Hackney. She's a community activist, dual diagnosis practitioner in mental health, specializing in substance misuse. And in her role as an advice and guidance worker, she established a pathway project in her local community to address education, training, and employment needs and issues, with a main focus on 16 to 25-year-olds. Cassandra is an advocate for community cohesion, for understanding, healing, and growth. Cassandra, please could you unmute yourself and let us see your beautiful face and share with us. Oh, and let me introduce Koya as well, because I was going to introduce her artist, but I have to introduce her as well. So we have the lovely Koya with Cassandra, her beautiful daughter. She's a year 11 student in the process of revising for her exams, doing really well as well. That's been taken this year. And following in her mother's footsteps, Koya is also passionate about families coming together and community cohesion. Koya has volunteered within the community with her mother, leading and supporting and training adults in computer skills. She wants to continue affecting positive change intergenerationally and community-wide. Yeah, so Koya and Cass.
Good evening. Yeah, manners and respect to everybody. This has provoked and evoked loads of feelings for me. It's taken me back somewhat. The film was really informative. It was, as I said, it evoked some emotional feelings for me differently. And it's made me actually look at my whole being and journey and what I really relate race to. Because I think as a person of color, I've suppressed a lot of what I actually feel and relate to race because of how it emotionally affects me, how it emotionally has stressed me out. And even in saying all of that, I have fought continually for my race not to impede me as an individual, as a professional, as a being, because I think that is a privilege and a right that I own unapologetically. I should be classed and looked at like everybody else. And I can tell you that being born of color, I actually had to speak about how I felt about race to give myself the understanding of where it really takes me. So I wrote some things down, and I felt like I was taught race was just about my color. It was just based on the color. And then when I thought about how I feel about what my race is and what race means to me, it touched me emotionally, spiritually, and mentally, because race to me meant nobody wants to be erased. Throughout the whole of my life, it's always meant that I don't want to be erased. I want to be significant. I want to be inclusive. I want to be I want to be all of the things that everybody else is without a judgment on the fact that I'm of color. And not only for myself, but for my family and my children, and even for the professions that I've gone into and the challenges that I've faced. And I'll tell you, I went from offending behavior, criminal justice, substance misuse, and mental health. Race to me, I care. I care that we're not looked at and we're not seen and we're not dealt with and inclusive to all the policies and processes out there that are meant to be for we, not some, but all. And it evoked feelings of fear to even express how race truly affects me. And not only me as an individual, my own trauma because of race can be very much handed down and can be enforced into your own, depending on the way you deal with it. Your experiences at school, you being challenged in public play. And I never ever wanted to do that because my parents taught me one thing in life, that is two: manners and respect. And if you know better, do better, regardless. And those two things have set the precedents for my perseverance, and never to make anything based on just my race hold me back. And And that film evoked, how do we readdress? But I've always been readdressing because of my race. It's what's driven me into certain fields. It's what's compounded me to go and actually look into certain practices. And I have no problem in engaging with others, as challenging as it is, about behaviors that are just based on the fact that because I differ from you, you can't have the manners, the respect, or the moral understanding is that we're all inclusive and should be dealt with on a level playing field.
Thank you, Cassandra. Thank you for your sharing. Feel it in my heart. And Koya.
Okay. Speaking from the perspective as someone that attends full-time education, I believe that within schools, the conversations we have about race, regarding race, are currently like, well, they've always been on the surface rather than quite deep and kind of into the real issues that I would go through day in, day out, which kind of, I think it leaves like a kind of path for people to say they're uneducated about these kind of topics, and therefore they're kind of able to disrespect you in that way and kind of abuse the fact that they are uneducated about these kind of issues, because day to day they don't kind of suffer any of that. And I also think it's not just students that are able to do this, it's also like staff that are able to kind of portray you as a student in that kind of way, based on the fact that our racial issues are not really brought into schools as a primary issue, in the sense that they're never spoke about in depth and they're just very on the surface.
Thank you, Koya. That truth, that's so much truth there. Thank you so much. Thank you for your sharing. Derek?
Okay. Thank you to the speakers. Thank you, Professor Liz. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Cassandra. And I tell you, it was a very deep watch. It's always uncomfortable to certain areas, and race is an area that people find very uncomfortable to discuss sometimes. But now we're going to have a chance to discuss further. We have a question and answer. So please feel free to raise your hands, and please get involved in the conversation, and don't hold back. We'll hold back sometimes, some things, but please try to engage and everyone try to really embrace this moment, because we've got some amazing and powerful speakers in here, and the community, the community. So let's go over to Roger and Tiane and see what questions we've got in the participants. Roger, Tiane.
Yes, thank you, everybody. And we can get Cassandra, Koya, Professor Les back as well. Let's all come together. Roger as well. And if you would like to share your question with us live or make any comments, put your hands up, raise your hands as we did yesterday, and we bring you in the conversation. Because I was having like feeling my whole body listening to Cassandra, Koya, Professor Les, all the things that are coming up. We have plenty of time today, so we want to hear you all, and I can see you pitches with your hands up. Let me get you here with us then. Here we go. I'm promoting you to panelist, and here we have pitches with us. Feel welcome to share your video as well, pitch if you want to, so we can see your face, or just to share your voice with us. Oh, there you are. Yes.
I'm traveling on the bus, but I said I needed to come in. I had to watch this. I watched yesterday. Well done to everybody at London Aces and everybody and all contributors. I wanted to say well done, Koya and Cassandra, but I was saying there was a whole thing regarding language. I watched the video yesterday and I was bored. I'm just going to say it as it is. A brilliant contribution, well done. But I was like, if we are trying to, one thing's for professionals, but at the same time, the level of professionals that we are trying to engage, like language is so important, as well as to work with people, then we have to be able to be bilingual. So yes, talking with the big words, talking with, you know, as an educated someone, yes, but there's a tone and there's an energy. And I thought that the video was a bit dated in regard to, you know, it just really did. I was like, oh, I wonder if certain young people watching it, if they were to watch it, what their feedback would be, or certain people from the community, what they'd be like watching it. And I remember I actually did have a conversation with Koya, because I mentor Koya, and she stated her opinion, you know, and it was exactly what I felt. You know, it was a struggle to watch for her. So I'm like, yeah, we need to get language right, to me, but it would be important, it would be great to hear other people's opinions regarding that. But I want to say well done to everybody who contributed, who created, and the work that you lot are doing. But I think that there needs to be the professionals coming through. Not only do they need to be educated, but they need to be they need to be inclusive, and language is a good way to start. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thanks so much, Peaches.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Okay, Professor Les, Cassandra, Koya, any comments on what the Peach has been sharing?
As soon as people have got titles or scripts to live up to, they tend to. But that narrative isn't heartfelt. When I say expert by experience, the reason I say that is that when you hear from somebody how race and racism has affected them, they transfer that collectively to anybody listening, so that they actually get the power and the understanding and the nature and gravity of what they're actually dealing with. So for me, it is always about, rather than go back historically and look at all the background and bear into it, we actually make a lot better changes when we show it, and the expression of it, and the lived expression of it. It is more effective, especially to young people, when they can see that somebody has overcome something so detrimental and gone on to better. Yeah. But for them to see and feel it, and it's been expressed in its entirety and real time, second to none.
Thanks, Cassandra. Thanks so much. Professor Les, any comments?
Well, I thought a lot of what Peaches was said was interesting. The thing for me is crucial about language, but I don't really see how we can dehistoricize, because it's the history and it's not what is supposedly represented as history in the public arena we have to worry about, because that's not it. So for instance, what happened with the young sister in Hackney last week, I spoke on that yesterday at a social work conference in University of West London, where I teach. And people in the audience were visibly upset, because I rooted that back in the historical experience of African chattel enslavement. You cannot separate it and act as if it's just a random act by some brutish police against a black girl. That denies the history. The history is Africans were the racist Europeans who created this racist system. And I know, is it Dexter Diaz, I think his name was? He was talking about, you know, when it was created in Spain and all this wonderful stuff, that's fine. But for me, the pernicious system that we've inherited was deliberately deployed against peoples of African ancestry to reduce us to chattel slaves. Chattels are not slavery, which is what a lot of people try and compare and contrast what we went through. We were reduced to less than human. So a very quick example. You'll get black people who call themselves Marxists. Okay, they'll say, I'm a black Marxist, I'm a black this, it's fine. But when Karl Marx was coming up with his theory, Africans were not human. Therefore, we could not be proletariat. We could not be wage labor. We were forces of production, like a horse, a donkey, or a mule. And to me, if we don't understand that fundamental, we will always have the wrong conversations. Africans were not regarded as human beings. That's why they could do what they did to that sister last week. It's no different from what they did to Clinton McCurbin over here. It's no different from what they did to Rocky Bennett. It's no different from what they did to George Floyd. And it will go on until we actually say what it is. And the fact is, there is nowhere we are educated in this so-called edifice of Europe about what really happened to peoples of African ancestry, which is unique. We are the only members of the human family to be reduced to a mathematical equation for voting rights in America. We were 3/5 of a human being. So here's the context. If you look at the American Civil War, which I think was a civil war, one of them, don't care, doesn't matter. First person to die was a black so-called slave, Crispus Attucks. But 5 had to die before they counted 3. Most people don't understand that about the history. Because if you're 3/5 of a human, then for every 5, 3 get counted. You tell me when that's happened to another member of the human family. Never has. What happened to us as Africans is totally unique. So my idea is we need to approach it in the context of its uniqueness, because that's why loads of, even where academics I've worked with, they will say, you know, as Black people, we use the crutch, we claim victimhood, you know, disproportionality is a myth. I mean, that guy, the barrister guy, you know, he showed you some aspects of disproportionality, but the disproportionality is embedded in the system. Because Black people were never, if we say we call ourselves Black people or people of African ancestry, Europeans didn't expect us to be here having this conversation today. We should have been used as a labor force and wiped off the face of the planet. That's why that racist prime minister that we have, well, not we, Unav, because it's not my prime minister, him. He's the one who said in 2002 that we should recolonize Africa, but this time don't feel guilty. That's Boris Johnson, supposedly the prime minister of this country. And he's the one who's supposed to be a bastion of Englishness, Britishness, and whiteness. And he wasn't even born here. He was born in New York. Yet people like myself, like Derek, like Koya, like Cassandra, and her daughter, if the state considers us to be an enemy of the state, they can deport us to countries we don't even know. Can that happen to white people? There's the question. So that's kind of what I wanted to throw into the mix. We need to have some serious conversations about this. Serious conversations.
And what comes to me now is is like to unroot all this truth, right, Professor? Because I am from Brazil, and just listening to you, I totally connect with what you're saying in terms of our own history there and the reality we have up to these days in Brazil, to be frank. So thanks for bringing this very true kind of, let's face them. If we want to change, we need to face the monster, right?
We have to. And so the last point I would make is, you know, somebody sent me a little video clip the other day. It was a Jamaican brother. And he was basically critiquing the Jamaicans who are lining up saying they want to go and fight in the Ukraine against the Russians. Okay. Not realizing that the Ukraine was a bastion. No, not a bastion. The Ukraine was a safe haven for Nazis. So what a lot of people, and I know Brother Derek has traveled all over the place, and he's probably been to some of these European countries where they think they face neo-fascists. They're not neo-fascists. They are the original Nazis who were sheltered in places like the Ukraine, parts of Poland. So the point that I'm making is if you understand that history, then you will understand why the Black people who were in Ukraine, because remember, a lot of the people from the Caribbean and other places, like some of my nieces, went to Russia to learn to do nursing, because Jamaica used to have that relationship with Russia over the bauxite and the aluminium. So people don't really understand that there is a Black student presence in places like the Ukraine and Russia, etc. So when they started getting racially abused, a lot of people are like, oh, shock, horror. I'm saying to them, you need to go and look at the history. Because if you've got students can be a viable resource, because even if they say they're being sponsored by the government, someone is paying to put those bums on seats. It's an economic decision. But once they needed to get out of that danger, then we see how racism really works against African bodies, Black bodies, because I don't really invest too much in peoples of color and stuff like that. But, you know, that's Les's preference. But I think when we have these conversations, you know, that's why I say, you know, we've all got something of value to bring to the table, all of us. So, yeah, I hope that makes sense. Thank you.
It does make sense, and thanks for your sharing. And it is, again, if we want to change, we needed to start facing these very real truths and see what we can do next about them as well. And this is related to, in terms of what we do next, then we have a question from a participant today, saying that this goes to you, Koya, and to you, Cassandra, as well, and to Professor Les. Also, again, how can we engage and challenge schools to engage in deeper dialogue beyond the narrative around the underachievement of young Black boys, to improve their results, to actually seeing, valuing, and respecting Black children for who they are, the richness they bring, rather than seeing their individuality as a challenge to be overcome. Who would like to start?
The challenge in schools, the challenges in schools, they would have to recognize that they have responsibility and accountability for some of the issues and the behaviors towards children of color in the beginning. And they don't actually acknowledge that or recognize that on levels. Or they justify it by making excuses about their background and bearing, and the fact that their behaviors predominantly come from their homes, or the fact that they're living in poverty, and they don't actually ask any of them why they have any defenses or reactions within their school properties. It's about having those difficult conversations. It's about developing structures to deal with their mental health, because a lot of behaviors come through racial situations and the traumas that they hold through experiencing them. They're not going to go away. They are going to contain them. They retain them until somebody addresses them. And most of them don't get addressed until they start touching systems like criminal justice and mental health. And even then, they're stigmatized because of their race. What do you think would help?
Kind of reinforcing the same idea. I feel like in school, there's not a lot of their behaviors are deflected and seen as more disrespect rather than an actual issue, because the way they deal with their emotions is slightly different to someone else, because they're undergoing different issues which are more racially motivated in comparison to someone that's not going through the same type of issue. So therefore they act out in a different way, but obviously it's seen as something completely that it's not, basically, more or less. So I feel like there should be like more acknowledgement of like different types of response to trauma and like responses to racial injustice.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Yes. Thanks. So much. And there is another question there that's similar to this. How can we move forward with all this knowledge we are sharing? And Koya or Derek would like to read the next question.
Yeah, we've got how do we open people's ears and bring about systemic change from all levels, from organizational to governmental, in a system that is built on oppression and systemic racism and does not want to see or engage with it? Anonymous attendee.
Yes.
Giving us that question. I'm putting it out to everyone.
Yes, and it's connected with Emma comment as well, that she says recommendations on decolonizing the mind as the process. So we can join both the questions, right? Because they are pretty much similar and they can be combined. Who would like to start?
Well, I just found something. So I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Paul Abina.
Yeah.
If you haven't, you need to look up his work. Okay, he's created a fantastic timeline of African history, and he was actually in Brazil for about 5 years. So, but I remember reasoning with Brother Paul Abina. So this was in probably about 2002, 2003, something like that, because I quote him in some of my writings from that time. But I remember when I was reasoning with Brother Paul Abina, because he is or was a school teacher. I've never been a school teacher, but he pointed something out to me. And I'm going to read a quote taken from something that I've written. It might be one of my books or an article, but this is what it says. It says, according to Paul Emmy Abina, the British schools and national curriculum offers valuable guidelines for any community groups wishing to see positive content inputs in relation to knowledge that helps to raise Black student self-esteem. The second paragraph of the national curriculum, this is what it says, under values, aims, and purposes, opens with the statement, foremost is a belief in education at home and at school as a route to the spiritual, moral, social, cultural, physical, and mental development, and thus the well-being of the individual. So my point is this, and when I wrote this article, school teachers, now you see we're kind of caught in a bit of a bind here, because I actually feel sorry for school teachers. I'm doing a couple of assemblies in a school in St. Albans next week. I do them regularly. And I kind of feel sorry for school teachers because they're shackled. They're shackled by the curriculum and they are definitely overworked, which is why there's such a crisis within education among school teachers. Okay, they don't have enough time. Sometimes they got 30 students. How can you teach 30 students at the same time? It's almost impossible. How can you engage with them? However, what I just read out from the national curriculum demonstrates how the broader, if we talk about the broader institutions who oversee curricular development, deliberately fail Black students, because we're talking about Black students, let's say African students, peoples of African ancestry. Because if you're saying that fundamentals like spiritual, moral, social, cultural, physical, and mental development are central to the national curriculum, then why should they not be factored in? Because there are ways to do it. But for me, what happens is, so as I said, so I would actually remove some of the blame from teachers because in many ways they're shackled, okay? And I would go broader. So it could be in the context of teacher training, but it's definitely to do with the people who run the schools. Definitely. People who are like Minister of Education and people like that. I've reasoned with people like them before. I used to go to meetings in Parliament and City Hall and all these places, and I stopped going because all they do is just, you know, just some malt talk. They're not really interested. And when it comes to kind of trying to, let's say, decolonize, because the MA that I created, which I created with a couple of my colleagues, but it was my brainchild, was about decolonization and social justice, because you can't just say you're decolonizing for the sake of decolonizing, because that doesn't make any sense. You have to decolonize in the pursuit of an equitable society based on social justice. And for me, that's the conversation that people don't want to have. Because then what that means is people who are empowered and in positions of power need to understand that they're generally there oftentimes just because they're white. It's not about their intellectual capacity. It's not what they bring to the table. It's because they are in a white skin. A white skin is valued, and that's it. It's as simple as that. That's why when you hear, you know, foolish politicians like that one who's in some junior Tory party member who said, if you teach critical race theory, if you teach white privilege, you're breaking the law. And that's because in fact, she had a discussion with Dawn Butler, who I have a lot of respect for, okay? And if I reasoned with Dawn Butler, I would have said to Dawn Butler, the next time you are in Parliament, you need to ask this woman, if systemic racism isn't real, if institutionalized racism isn't real, if you're saying white privilege isn't real, then why is there nobody of African ancestry at the top table in the Tory government? Because I believe they've reeled in that one that they usually get. Yeah, so I have to be careful because we got children. So let's just call him a houseboy. They reel him in every now and again as a tokenistic gesture. But what critically changes, if you're saying the high seat of power and governance in the UK is the Conservative Party, and there are no people of African ancestry around the top table, how are you going to expect anything to qualitatively change? That's why that half idiot, Matt Hancock, said, diversity of thought is good enough. So if we're diverse in our thinking, all of a sudden it's good enough. It's ridiculous. We need to have the right conversations.
And Professor, can I add to that, that even if you look at Europe, I looked at the G7 meeting and I saw the leaders, the 7 or so white men and women are there, not one representation from people of color. So that means that there's no place for us other than not at the top table, we'll sit and have the crumbs.
Absolutely.
There's no mention of Africa, there's the people that rule the world. So we'll always be climbing up a steep hill, but sliding down because we can't get a grip. So that's where we are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And what you are saying, Professor Zell, it reminded me of what a Gray book, one of our colleagues in the London Aces Hub, Fab psychiatrist, Black psychiatrist who has been fighting for justice, has been addressing with us for some time. I will mention what Agri said, but I just want to check with Joe. Joe, I can see a few comments from you in the chat. And it would be wonderful if you are willing to share your voice with us. I bring you in as well. And I know you have some comments direct to Kaya as well. So just think about if you would like to come, I give you the panelist access as well. And then you can share, if you don't want to share your video, it can be on your voice. And while Joe decide, I just want to say I have the email that Grace sent to us, to me and Roger, and he said, perhaps it would be useful and informative to flag up issues related to deprivation. You may well ask, what about the tragedy of slavery? Was it successful in creating a new order in society? So everything you've been saying, Professor Les, reminded me this email that Grace sent to us. And the importance, the social justice aspect of all that we are talking about here as well, right? In terms of the changes needed in the why for so long, these changes haven't taken place, to be honest. Koya, Cassandra, Kaya, Derek, any more comments before I bring Joe in as well, while I can find Joe here?
I just wanted to say quickly that I totally agree with Elizabeth Munsey and the comment on education, because if we don't appreciate or understand how the tripartite system, the educational system after the Second World War, was designed to rebuild the country. So that's why, you know, I love the comment where it was, you don't need literate and numerate people to work on factories, bomb sites, and on building sites. And so when Black people came here this time, because we know African people have been here for thousands of years, you know, we don't have to worry about that. But when people came en masse post-Windrush, or Windrush and post-Windrush, that's why we inhabited those spaces. And the problem with this white racist society that we live in, which, as Derek just said, in macro, it's across the whole damn planet, is because we were supposed to occupy the lower echelons of society. We were never supposed to rise. I don't believe we were supposed to be here.
Woo, okay, so much here, food for thought and action. Joe, welcome as well, Joe. Yes, I saw some comments bringing where you are at in all these reflections.
just to say how powerful and important it is to hear the voices that are here, and also for white people like myself to be doing the work on ourselves and to be thinking and engaging in depth with these issues and committed to the systemic change, cultural, social, organizational that we need to see, and valuing the voices of young people in particular, as well as older people, in order to build on transformation and change. And just really wanting to value the truth of what's being said, and that we would have, I believe, a more soulful society. I'm a psychotherapist, and I feel that we need to develop a more soulful society and a more community-oriented society. And I learn and listen a lot to Koya and Derek in particular. And I feel there is so much that we have to grow and flourish if we were able to work together and be more safe and effective in our understanding of each other's wounds, and learn how to recover. It's going to take a long time to recover because the wounds are so significant and enormous and substantial and far-reaching. And just want to honor the voices of people who are speaking and say thank you for communicating and sharing.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks so much, Joe. And just to say to everybody that Joe played a key role to facilitate the partnership between the London ACEs Hub and the Trauma-Informed Schools UK, and for this event to be happening. So thanks so much, Joe, as well. Okie dokie, Koya, I can see you reflecting there. Any thoughts, I can sense, you know, a lot there, and Derek as well, and everybody. We have 12 minutes left, so there is still time to bring in your voices and your reflections and questions to Cassandra, Kaya, Professor Les as well. Feel very welcome to raise your hand and bring in your comments and questions. Yes, Koya.
No, I'm just saying, I just really feel affected. I'm impacted in it, all the sharing and the information. Yeah, I'm with it in the moment right now. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, you see, when I say the school system and black boys, Les and myself, we're from South London. We come from very young, and we grew up in South London, and we wasn't supposed to be where we are today. The system is not designed for us to succeed. We succeed because the families and our strength and resilience, because if we go the way society wants us to go, we'd be locked up behind bars. And that's the goal, that's our destiny, that's the narrative of a young black boy. But society has other options, not for black boys, but for us to struggle for our life. And then we have our children starting, and it'll be a continuous journey where we're unable to lead them out of the same hole. So we're still enslaved. On that, we haven't got the chains and the physical chains, but it's the mental slavery that prevents you from really excelling. So our message is to go around and preach positivity and spread that vibe, because if we keep having these conversations, this is what people begin to realize, that we're no longer sitting down and taking it. Everyone is speaking up. Right now, they got William in Jamaica trying to answer for what happened to his ancestors done to our ancestors all those years ago, but he still can't apologize. He still can't apologize. So that's where we are today. We got a corrupt government. we're in a situation where everything is becoming unveiled now, but people are feeling uncomfortable. They're not sure how they're going to deal with it. How do they deal with it? And that's the question.
To me, to kind of pick up on what Derek just said, you know, I'm not into apologies. I'll be honest with you. I was saying I ain't got no time for that. But to me, somebody sent a very interesting message around the other day, and they said, "Isn't it ironic that the Queen is still some kind of figurehead in Jamaica, but Jamaicans have to get a visa to come to England?" So to me, that's why they should just run her out. They should run her out, run him out, run the whole of them out, because they're of no use or benefit to us over here. And what that is, you know, if you think about it, the person who actually institutionalized the chattel enslavement of African peoples was Elizabeth I. She did that. So that is why they will always be directly responsible for the way the world is. And so if you want to look at India under the Raj, or you want to look at what they did to people in China, or someone mentioned indigenous, you know, brothers and sisters in places like Australia or First Nation peoples, the so-called invisible hand, I'm trying to remember, I think it was somebody, Thomas Hobbes, one of them spoke about the invisible hand. It might have been him, I remember. But it's not an invisible hand, it's a very visible hand, and it's a white hand, and it's still there. It still pulls all the strings. It's still, you know, globally, I think white people who classify themselves as white, remember, it's white racist Europeans who came up with these classifications anyway. And the ones who are classified as Caucasian or white are less than 8% of the global population, but they probably control 85% of the resources. That's a power dynamic that is going to be very difficult to dislodge. So somebody asked about decolonizing the mind recommendations, and to me, these are some of the things that you can do quite easily. Just look at the situation. Don't take for granted the things that they say. So for instance, when that David Starkey basically said slavery wasn't genocide because there's so many damn blacks in Africa and here, when was a genocidal incident complete annihilation or extermination? Because why do Jews talk about the genocide of the Shoah, which we know as the Holocaust? And then what David Starkey did in that, which is, I use this with my students and the community stuff I do. And I say to people, listen to what he says. He conflates a Catholic identity with an African identity or a Black identity. How can they even be the same thing? So to me, when we look at it, if we want to talk about decolonizing our minds, we need to take a step back and think about what half of these fools are saying and wonder if we should really even engage with them. Because he said we dealt with Catholics, or whatever it was, the persecution of Catholics at the same time as we dealt with slavery 200 years ago. But how can you conflate a religious identity with a racialized one? And we know race isn't real, we know that, but the consequences of it are, which is why you have racism. Because that speaks to theory, it speaks to ideology, it speaks to systems of power that structurally place Africans at the bottom of the ladder, regardless of where we are on this planet. That's the true discussion. So if we're going to talk about decolonizing, then we do. You know, sister said she comes from Brazil. I know loads of people don't know what, there's something like 70 million so-called Yoruba Black Africans in Brazil.
Yes.
Yeah, they've got the biggest Yoruba community outside of Nigeria in Brazil. How many people know that? You want to decolonize, you need to rethink, look at the world through a different lens. But to be honest, why I give thanks that I was invited on this panel, and I give thanks to Brother Derek and all of you are hosting this, because these are what we need. And we don't need to have 2,000 or 10,000 people. We just need to have some people who are interested in being conscientized, or whatever we want to call it, who when they leave here will try and affect some kind of critical change, because change is incremental. As them say, you can't eat a horse or a cow in one bite. You have to nibble. And that's what we have to do. We just have to, it's like what Brother Derek said, you know, we know what the plan was for us when we were youths. I got expelled from school at 15 and expelled from college at 16. My twin brother didn't. So he was definitely more astute and mature than I was, because I fell into the trap that they laid for us as peoples of African ancestry. He didn't. And that for me is when, if we're going to talk about decolonizing minds and changing the way we think, and that's why I give thanks that, you know, the sister is here with her daughter, because that's what we need. You know, we need intelligent, articulate young people like that, but they've got to understand that we cannot just expose them with our armor into battle, because they will be destroyed. They will be destroyed.
Thanks for that, Professor Les. Yes, so much food for thought and action, because this is what we are doing here, action. And that is why the London Races Hub created the Racial Justice Workgroup out of pure frustration and share the pain, to be honest. And listen to saying, this, we cannot just listen, just talk the talk. We need to walk the talk more and more until we break the barriers. And I am aware that we have 3 minutes left at the call. Oh my gosh. And just to mention to you guys and acknowledge that Roger, everything has happened today, let's face it. But this shows our commitment. We don't give up, ever. Koya was stuck in traffic. Roger got a power cut. He was totally removed from... I said, Roger, where are you?
Can I celebrate Derek and Koya's commitment? Because they're very inspiring leaders. And Koya is through drama, is a transformational cultural activist. And I think her work brings an amazing language of transformation to young people. And Derek's work on the champion mindset, motivating and inspiring young people. And I would really want to support the kind of work they do, which is profoundly healing and transformational, empowering, and the way forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
And they are our colleagues, right? Our colleagues in the Racial Justice Workgroup, amazing people.
Yeah, it's funny because, you know, today almost every step of the way we were challenged. Professor Les couldn't get in. Yes. Sister Koya couldn't get here. I couldn't get in. I couldn't get on at first. Roger's been taken out of the system, but we're still here. So that shows the system is fighting against us, but we're pushing back. If you think about history, if you look at every African leader that's come up and tried to unite Africa or tried to show some kind of positivity to the community, they've been taken out by the West. They've been killed. They've been jailed. They've been criminalized. But we're still here.
Absolutely.
Still here.
Thanks. And in the last minute, Cassandra and Koya, we want your final comments as well before we go to Koya to close, and Derek.
Yeah, I hope in time to come they stop suppressing our expression. Yeah, our thoughts and feelings are paramount. It affects our mental health and our healing. And that's how we mean to go on. Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I advocate so venomously. I don't only hear, I listen. Yeah, it makes a difference.
Thank you to all. Is that everyone?
Koya, Derek.
Koya,
you can't leave Koya out.
Tomorrow's leader, right?
We weren't going to let you. We need to hear your voice.
We're going to let you go, Koya, for your final comments.
I really enjoyed this group, and I just hope in the future there's more like groups like this with more young people based. I feel like young people should really be able to voice their opinions a lot more.
Absolutely. Definitely.
Totally.
And Koya, let me tell you, you spoke like a person of years experience, way older than yourself. And so you're going to go very far in the community. We're going to keep you where you're supposed to be as a number one leader. I want to thank all the speakers tonight. Professor Les, we got back a long way.
Yeah, man. We give thanks.
Cassandra, thank you. Koya, thank you. Joe, thank you for the words. And the team, Tiane, Koya, and to Roger who's not here. I want to say to everyone that we're going to be giving out to everyone who's joined tonight. We're going to give you a CPPD certificate that will be emailed to you at some point later in the week. And a feedback form will be available after the webinar. So please take a minute to complete it. And your views are very welcome. So If you're interested in joining or listening to what we're doing at the London ACES Hub, the website is londonaceshub.org. So the more information we will send to you, and thank you, and we look forward to you who's coming tomorrow. If not, listen out for it. Spread the word. It's very big.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. You have a blessed evening, everybody. Stay blessed.
Yep.
You too. Take care, everybody. Thank you for being with us.
Give time.
Thank you.
Everybody look after yourselves. See
Look
you
after
tomorrow.
yourselves.
Ciao, ciao.